There's an uncomfortable secret that's rarely spoken out loud. Not everything we live, feel, or think has to be shared. Many times we believe that the more we tell, the less alone we'll feel. But in reality, what we're doing is giving up our inner refuge. What we hand out in excess, what we expose without filter, ends up weakening the peace we're searching for at this stage of life. And here comes the big question. What things are better kept in silence to protect your dignity, your calm, and your emotional freedom? Hello, my name is Gabriel, and for more than 15 years, I've studied and practiced Stoicism as a philosophy of life. I've helped hundreds of people around the world live with wisdom, virtue, and above all, with courage, even in the most uncertain moments. And what I've learned is that true strength often lies not in speaking, but in keeping silent. Silence, when chosen wisely, is not empty. It's a shield against intrusion, a fertile ground where serenity grows, a reminder that you don't need to explain everything to everyone in order to have courage. Throughout this talk, we'll go through 11 practical and profound lessons, drawn from philosophy, psychology, and human experience, that will show you what you should never share. Not with your children, not with your family, not with your friends. If you want to live your later years with more peace and less burden, get ready to reflect, to feel supported on this journey, and above all, to discover the power hidden in your silence. Let's begin. Number 1. Don't share your plans. There's something curious that happens to all of us. When we tell people what we're going to do, we feel an immediate sense of relief, as if we've already taken a step forward. But in reality, we haven't lifted a finger. We've only opened our mouth. What happens, and neuroscience explains this, is that our brain releases dopamine when we share a project. That little hit tricks the nervous system, making you believe you're already fulfilling your goal. And suddenly, your real motivation deflates. Have you ever announced something with enthusiasm, only to leave it half done? Exactly that. Silence, on the other hand, keeps the inner tension alive that pushes you to act. Think of the Stoics. Epictetus used to say that we shouldn't boast about what we haven't done yet, because what matters is not the word, but the action. That ancient lesson fits perfectly with what modern psychology tells us. Habits are built through daily practice, not through talking about them in advance. That's why when you decide to start an exercise routine, a creative project, or a personal goal, your best ally is secrecy. You don't need external approval to make it real. I remember a time in my life when I would announce every change with great fanfare. I'm going to start waking up earlier. I'm going to write a book. I'm going to quit this habit. It sounded convincing, but the truth is, many times it ended up being just words. It was a humbling moment to realize what I was really seeking was early recognition, not discipline. I learned to stay quiet, and suddenly my energy focused where it should, on doing, not telling. I invite you to try something simple. Pick a small goal for the next 30 days and don't tell anyone. Just write it down in your notebook and carry it out in silence. At the end of the month, see how you feel. Most likely you'll discover an unexpected pleasure, the joy of savoring private victories, without witnesses, without pressure, without having to prove anything to anyone. Silence here is not a wall, it's a refuge. Your plans are like freshly planted seeds. If you bring them out into the light too soon, they wither. If you leave them in the soil, protected, they grow strong. Not everything you imagine needs immediate exposure. The patience to wait and the courage to act in silence give you back your power. So ask yourself, what plans are you giving away to the air before you've lived them? What would happen if, just once, you kept them only for yourself, like a treasure in incubation? You might discover that greatness is best cooked in secret. In the end, the essential truth is this: virtue is proven in deeds, not in announcements. Your silence is the fertile ground of your integrity. And when the time comes to show what you've achieved, you won't need words, because your actions will speak for you. Number 2, don't show off your savings or your debts. Money is one of those topics that seems harmless until it turns toxic. Talking too much about what you have or what you lack opens unnecessary doors to comparison, envy, or even manipulation. In old age, when strength is no longer the same and financial independence becomes a delicate subject, that kind of exposure can turn into a heavy burden. What you reveal about your finances can end up working against you, even with the people closest to you. The Stoics were clear that wealth does not define virtue. Seneca, who was a wealthy man, often repeated it. A person's worth lies in their character, not in their possessions. But we live in societies where numbers seem to speak louder than wisdom, and that's why silence becomes an art. If you share the details of what you save or what you owe, you expose yourself to judgments that have nothing to do with your essence. A child may start to feel entitled to that money. A friend may look at you with suspicion. A distant relative may draw near only out of interest. And if what you reveal are your debts, you risk that compassion turns into pity, or worse, into mistrust. A few years ago, I had an experience that taught me a hard lesson. Out of naivete, I told an acquaintance how much I was saving for a personal project. At first, what I saw in his eyes looked like admiration, but over time it turned into veiled criticism. Why save so much? Don't you think you're overdoing it? That money was the fruit of my discipline, but by talking about it, I had turned it into a weapon against myself. I learned to stay silent and discovered the peace of knowing no one has access to my wallet. I'm not saying you should live in paranoia. It's healthy to discuss finances with a trusted advisor or someone who can truly help you make good decisions. But beyond that small circle, silence is your shield. When someone asks, "How much have you saved?" or "How much do you still owe?" you have every right to answer gracefully, "I'd rather not talk about that, I'm in good order," or simply smile and change the subject. Money, when spoken about too much, becomes a source of anxiety. When managed in silence, it's a resource that sustains your dignity without making noise. Financial peace doesn't come from the numbers you share, but from the serenity with which you manage them. Ask yourself, what do you really gain by telling others about your savings or your debts? Are you looking for approval, compassion, validation? And if you stayed silent, what would you lose? Most likely, nothing. And in fact, you'd gain freedom. Silence around money isn't selfishness. It's prudence. It's the simplest way to remember that your worth isn't measured in bills, but in your character, your peace, and your ability to stand on your own without depending on the judgment of others. Number 3, don't share every detail of your ailments with everyone. There's a curious phenomenon. When you talk about your symptoms over and over, your brain amplifies them. Science calls it the nocebo effect. It's as if each word were a magnifying glass that enlarges the pain and fixes it in your memory. In the end, the ailment doesn't just live in your body, it also occupies your mind and takes over your daily conversations. Constantly talking about what hurts is like inviting discomfort to stay for dinner every day. This doesn't mean you should stay quiet with your doctor. On the contrary, with your physician, it's best to be clear and specific, giving every detail that allows for a good diagnosis. It also helps to keep a notebook where you write down your symptoms, because writing organizes and releases without dragging everyone else into your discomfort. The problem begins when those stories spill into every meal, every phone call, every chat with friends or family. What you seek as relief ends up becoming a shared burden that strains relationships and locks you into the identity of the sick person. I experienced this once at a family lunch. I wasn't talking about myself, but listening to a relative list, like an inventory, all of his aches and pains. At first, everyone looked sympathetic, but over time I saw how the faces dimmed. No one knew what to say, the food grew cold, and the meal turned into a small funeral of energy. That's when I understood that sometimes silence is also a gift to others. If you feel the need to talk, choose one trusted person and do it with the intention of finding relief, not out of repetition. You can also practice a short exercise before a medical appointment. 3 deep breaths, inhaling through the nose and exhaling through the mouth, to center yourself and avoid the anxiety of spilling everything out without order. And now, before we continue, I ask you for a small favor. If these words resonate with you, Subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and tell me in the comments what country you're watching from. I love seeing how this community grows with people from so many parts of the world sharing the same desire to live with wisdom and calm. Remember, your identity is not your illness. What you choose to share shapes the image others have of you and the one you hold of yourself. Keeping quiet about certain ailments doesn't mean denying what you feel. It means giving space to other parts of you, your humor, your creativity, your serenity. Ask yourself, do you want to be remembered as someone who constantly spoke of their pain, or as someone who, despite it, radiated peace and presence? The answer lies in the silence you choose to practice. Because sometimes the best medicine isn't in the word, but in the silence that protects your dignity. Let's continue. Number 4. Don't explain your boundaries to those who don't respect them. Something I've learned over time is this: people who truly care about you and respect you don't need a lecture to understand your boundaries. If you say no, that's enough. On the other hand, those who have never considered your needs, no matter if you give them a 20-minute speech, will still try to push past them. Over-explaining to people who don't listen is like watering sand, wasted effort that leaves you drained and frustrated. The Stoics knew this well. Marcus Aurelius said, "We shouldn't waste time arguing with those who aren't searching for truth, because their interest isn't understanding, but winning." When you over-justify a no, you invite debate and put your decision up for negotiation. In the end, your boundary gets weakened and you end up feeling guilty. Has it ever happened that you said no, then explained yourself, and eventually gave in because you couldn't handle the pressure? That's exactly what we're talking about. I lived it firsthand with a childhood friend who was always asking for favors. Once, I told him I couldn't help because I was busy, and then I went on to explain my entire weekly schedule. What did he do? Look for gaps in my agenda and try to convince me that I could help after all. That day, I realized that giving explanations to someone who doesn't respect your time is like handing them the instruction manual on how to pressure you further. The key lies in short, firm answers. You can practice phrases like, "I'm not going to discuss this," "It's not good for me," or simply, "No." The goal is to hold your ground calmly without raising your voice or justifying yourself. Think of it as the broken record technique. Repeat your decision with serenity, without agitation, until the other person gets tired. Your boundary doesn't need arguments because it's not an exam to be graded, it's your right. Think about this. When you over-justify, your brain switches into defense mode, your emotions get triggered, and you end up exhausted. But when you deliver a calm no, what you feel is immediate relief. Practicing this takes courage, but each time you do it, you reinforce the truth that your peace is non-negotiable. So the next time someone insists after you've already said no, remember, over-explaining only fuels their invasion. Ask yourself if you'd rather spend your energy convincing someone who will never respect you or protecting your peace. Silence in these cases isn't emptiness, it's power. Your boundaries hold better when you don't explain them to those who don't deserve it, but when you live them with firmness. And believe me, once you respect your own no, others have no choice but to get used to it. Number 5, don't stir up old resentments. There are wounds that, even after healing, still itch if you insist on scratching them. Talking over and over about what someone did to you 10, 20, or even 30 years ago is like opening a window that lets in stale air. At first, it feels like relief, but all you're really doing is breathing the same pain again. And here's the strange part. Every time the brain recalls an offense in detail, it records it again as if it were a recent event. The past stops being the past and turns into a perpetual present. The Stoics understood this well. Epictetus often reminded us that we can't control what others did, only how we choose to remember it. If you keep revisiting every betrayal or injustice with words, you chain yourself to them. If instead you choose silence and let them live on only as quiet marks of learning, you set yourself free. In this case, silence isn't denial, it's mental hygiene. Some years ago, I ran into an acquaintance I hadn't seen in ages. Almost before we exchanged greetings, he reminded me of an offense I had caused him unintentionally decades earlier. He spoke with the same intensity as back then, as if no time had passed. I looked at him and thought, this man hasn't lived 20 years. He's repeated 1 year 20 times. And then I asked myself if I was doing the same with my own memories. That moment changed me. There's an exercise I recommend, one that helped me personally. Write a letter to the person you resent. Pour into it everything you've been holding back, everything that hurts without filter. Then don't send it. Burn it or lock it away in a drawer. That symbolic act is a reminder that you don't need to share that burden with anyone, not even with the person who caused it. What matters is not that they understand, but that you decide to let go. You can also picture an invisible stone you carry on your back. Each time you speak of an old resentment, the stone grows heavier. But when you choose silence and stop stirring it up, the stone slowly dissolves. It's a simple metaphor, but it helps you see how silence lightens the load. Ask yourself, do you want to keep repeating the same painful chapter until the end of your life? Or would you rather start new pages where the past no longer plays the lead role? What you choose to leave unsaid gives you peace. What you choose to repeat reopens wounds. Resentment never disappears by talking about it more. On the contrary, it weakens when you stop feeding it. Here, silence isn't cowardice, it's wisdom. Keeping it is a gift you give yourself, the chance for your present to finally be free of the ghosts of the past. Number 6. Don't boast about your help or your donations. There's a kind of noise that looks like kindness but is really vanity in disguise. Talking too much about what you've given or how you've helped. Telling others how much you supported your children, how much you lent to a friend, or how many times you helped a neighbor doesn't add, it subtracts. Because in truth, what is born from generosity doesn't need to escape through words. It shines on its own. The Stoics understood this in a radical way. Seneca said that a favor loses its value when it's thrown in someone's face. In other words, if you help expecting recognition, it's not virtue, it's a transaction. And here, biblical wisdom strongly agrees. In Matthew 6:3, we read a line that has always struck me. Let your left hand not know what your right hand is doing. It's a direct invitation to practice discretion, to remember that the greatness of a gesture doesn't lie in how others see it, but in the peace it leaves within you. I once knew an elderly woman in a poor neighborhood who changed many lives without anyone knowing. She quietly paid school fees for children who couldn't afford them, left bags of food at doors after dark, and never put her name on anything. Only when she passed away did the community discover all she had done. Her silence spoke louder than any speech. And the remarkable thing is that while she lived, she always seemed light, free of the weight that comes from needing recognition. I, on the other hand, once fell into the opposite trap. I remember helping someone financially, and later, in a burst of pride, I mentioned it at a gathering. Not a minute had passed before I felt uncomfortable, as if I had betrayed the essence of the gesture. I learned the lesson. When you brag about helping, the act stops being yours and becomes decoration for your ego. I invite you to practice the opposite. Help in silence. Do small things without telling anyone, not even your closest circle. That practice trains something deeper than generosity. It trains your freedom from the need for approval. Ask yourself, do you help because you truly want to, or because you want to be remembered as the generous one? How much of what you give is pure, and how much is a hunger for applause? Silence can answer better than words. In the end, what's boasted about becomes noise. What's kept quiet becomes virtue. Remember this, authentic kindness doesn't need witnesses. And when you practice that kind of discretion, you'll discover that helping in silence is one of the deepest ways to feel at peace with yourself. Number 7, don't be the link in family gossip. Gossip is like a spark in a dry forest. It seems small, but it only takes one to set everything ablaze. In families, especially when there are several generations involved, gossip turns into a dangerous game of broken telephone that poisons relationships and breeds distrust. Being the channel through which secret information passes doesn't make you more important. It only makes you a messenger of conflict. The curious thing is that gossip, according to social psychology studies, activates the same reward circuits as food or sugar. Yes, Talking about others gives us a quick hit of dopamine, but that sweetness is short-lived and comes with a hangover. Guilt, distance, resentment. What seemed like entertainment ends up leaving wounds that last for years. The wise of old had their own filter. Socrates spoke of the triple test before passing something along. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? If the answer to any of these is no, better to stay silent. And here's where practice comes in. Next time someone brings you a family rumor, you can try a couple of graceful exits. I'd rather not get into that. Hopefully they talk about it directly, or even shift the subject with humor. Sometimes a smile and a light-hearted comment diffuse the bomb before it explodes. I remember a scene that left a mark on me. During a family meal, an aunt began speaking badly about another who wasn't present. Suddenly, I noticed the tension around the table, but no one dared cut her off. Awkwardly, I stepped in. "Why don't we talk about the dessert recipe instead?" Everyone laughed, the conversation shifted, and the mood lightened. That day, I understood that you don't need to preach to stop gossip. It's enough not to play along. The trouble with gossip is that it drains the energy you could be investing in something that builds you up. And once you take part, sooner or later you become the topic yourself. Because whoever brings you gossip about others will just as easily carry yours down the road. Ask yourself, do you want to be remembered as the one who fueled family fires, or as the one who put them out with silence? The choice lies in every word you decide to pass on or keep. In this case, silence isn't indifference, it's practical wisdom. By refusing to be the link in rumors, you become a guardian of your peace and an example of dignity. Because nothing strengthens a family more than the member who chooses not to divide with words, but to unite with silence. Number 8. Don't compare your children or your grandchildren. Comparisons are like knives disguised as compliments. Look how hard your brother works. Your cousin is already married and you're not. Your sister calls me more often. Even when said with apparent innocence, they leave deep scars. Each time you compare one child or grandchild to another, you plant competition instead of love, insecurity instead of confidence. And the worst part, you reduce a person to a performance score, as if they were pieces in a tournament where someone will always lose. The Stoics insisted that every human being has their own logos, their unique path. Marcus Aurelius said that the display window of life isn't the same for everyone. Each one fulfills a different, yet equally necessary role. Applied to family life, this means your task isn't to put your children in a race, but to recognize them in their individuality. When you compare, you're looking outward. When you value what each one is, you're looking inward. I remember a conversation with a grandson who was frustrated because his grades weren't as good as his cousins. The easy thing would have been to say, "Work harder, look how she can do it." Instead, I asked him what he enjoyed learning, what made his eyes light up. We discovered together that he loved drawing, and from then on, we celebrated his talent. He didn't need to compete to feel worthy. You can practice something very simple. Replace comparisons with curiosity. Instead of, "Your brother already has a job and you," try asking, "What are you most excited about right now?" That kind of question opens doors instead of closing them. Because when you place two people on the same podium, one ends up above and the other below. But when you ask from curiosity, each remains in their own place, with their own value. The Bible also reminds us of this principle in Galatians 6:4. Each one should test their own actions, then they can take pride in themselves alone without comparing themselves to someone else. A direct reminder that the right measure isn't comparison, but personal awareness. Ask yourself, do you want your children and grandchildren to remember you as someone who set them against each other, or as someone who made them feel unique and unrepeatable? In this case, silence isn't the absence of words, it's the choice not to use words that wound. Keeping comparative judgments to yourself is a gift of a family space free of tension. Because love, when it's genuine, doesn't rank people, it accompanies. Number 9, don't put your spiritual life on display. Spirituality is like a secret garden. The more you expose it, the more its flowers wither. Talking too much about your practices, your prayers, or your intimate experiences with the divine can turn something sacred into a spectacle, and the sacred loses its power when it becomes currency for approval. You don't need to prove your faith or your spiritual connection for it to be real. On the contrary, it grows stronger when you cultivate it in silence. The Stoics already sense this. Seneca said that true greatness is being consistent in the hidden moments when no one is watching. And in the Bible, Matthew 6:6 offers a clear teaching. When you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father, who is unseen. Authentic faith doesn't seek an audience, it seeks intimacy. I once experienced something that left me with second-hand embarrassment. I met someone who constantly talked about their prayers, their fasting, how spiritual they were. The strange thing was that the more they said it, the clearer the gap became between their words and their actions. I realized that someone who needs to showcase their spirituality in every conversation isn't doing it out of faith, but out of ego. From that day on, I chose to safeguard my own practices, because spirituality isn't measured by what you say, but by how you live. You can try something simple. Keep a small daily ritual just for yourself, without announcing it to anyone. It could be a prayer, a moment of silence at dawn, a short reading. Do it in secret, and notice how your relationship with the divine strengthens, precisely because it's untouched by the expectations of others. Think of your spirituality as an inner garden. If you invite too many people to walk through it, the grass soon gets trampled and the flowers break. But if you care for it quietly on your own, that garden blooms and gives you shade on the hottest days. That's the difference between living faith as an intimate experience and using it as a billboard. Ask yourself, does what you share about your spirituality come from a desire to inspire or from a desire to be seen? That difference is crucial. A humble word can help. Constant self-promotion only empties the sacred. Spiritual silence isn't coldness, it's reverence. It's the recognition that the deepest truths aren't shouted, they're lived. When you choose to protect your faith from the spotlight, you discover that the divine becomes more present because it's no longer subject to anyone's judgment, only to your heart. Number 10. Don't justify every no. Saying no is already hard enough without feeling obliged to back it up with an essay. The problem is that when you get into the habit of justifying every refusal, you turn your decision into an open debate. What should have been a clear boundary becomes an invitation for others to try to convince you. What was once a firm no dissolves into a maybe. The Stoics often spoke of temperance, that virtue of choosing with serenity what you do and what you don't. A calm no is an act of temperance. You don't need to dress it up with excuses. I remember a phrase I once read in a book on practical psychology: when you over-explain, you lose authority over your own life. It hit me like a bucket of cold water because I saw myself in it. I was the kind of person who said, I can't because I have too much work, because I have a headache, because I have to wake up early tomorrow. Each explanation was like poking holes in the wall of my decision. The interesting thing is that when you try saying a simple no with no frills, you discover something freeing. The initial discomfort lasts only a few seconds. Then comes the calm of not having to maintain a lie, an excuse, or a speech. Just a clean, direct boundary. To practice, start with small, everyday situations. When someone asks you for a favor you don't want or can't do, respond with short phrases. That's not possible. No, not this time. No extra explanations. Think of it like a traffic light. Red means stop. No one expects the light to explain why it's red. It just is. Your no works the same way. This happened with a friend who always wanted me to spend time listening to her complaints, even when I had no energy. One day, instead of inventing excuses, I simply said, I can't today. There was an awkward silence. She accepted it. And later I realized our relationship became healthier, because I no longer felt forced to invent reasons just to protect my peace. In the end, life gets lighter when you understand that a no doesn't need appendices, because every time you justify yourself, what you're really doing is asking for permission to take care of yourself. And the truth is, you don't need anyone's permission to protect your peace. Number 11. Don't share your joys while they're still incubating. Newborn joys are fragile, like a sprout just breaking through the soil. If you expose them too soon, the winds of other people's opinions can snap them. Sharing with excitement those projects, new friendships, habits, or dreams that are just starting to grow makes you vulnerable to comments that, though not always ill-intentioned, can deflate your spirit. Do you really think that's worth it at your age? Or that won't last? Or even just a raised eyebrow, and suddenly what was joy turns into doubt? The Stoics reminded us that inner strength is cultivated in silence, in daily practice. Just as an athlete doesn't show his training, but only his performance in the arena, we need to incubate in secret what's just beginning to take shape. And here, neuroscience once again agrees. When you share your progress too early, your brain interprets external validation as an advance reward, which reduces your real motivation to continue. I remember when I started a simple habit, walking early at dawn. After a few days, I shared it with enthusiasm and immediately heard comments like, "That doesn't do anything. You'll get tired. You'll see. You'll quit soon." Strangely enough, those phrases stuck with me, and I ended up quitting sooner than I wanted. Later, I realized that if I had kept it to myself, I might have enjoyed it more and solidified the routine. Since then, I make small changes in silence until they're strong enough. You can try a personal ritual. Choose something new you want to cultivate, a hobby, a habit, a bond, and keep it secret for 40 days. Don't tell anyone. Don't post it. Just live it inside yourself. You'll discover that this incubator of silence becomes a refuge that protects your enthusiasm from outside interference. Think of your joys as a nest. If too many curious hands reach in, the eggs break. But if you guard it carefully, the life inside grows until it can fly on its own. Not everything that excites you needs to escape as words. Sometimes the greatest joy is watching it strengthen in private. Ask yourself, what would happen if you didn't share your next joy until it was already solid? You might be surprised to find that happiness becomes more yours, stronger, truer. Silence here isn't emptiness, it's a cradle. The joy you protect in silence blooms more powerfully, and when the time comes to share it, no comment will be able to bring it down, because it won't depend on anyone else, only on you and the life you've chosen to live. We've gone through 11 lessons that, though simple on the surface, hold deep wisdom. There are things better kept in silence to protect your peace, your dignity, and your inner freedom. We spoke about not sharing plans too soon, not exposing your savings or debts, not listing ailments at every meal, not justifying your limits, not stirring up resentments, not boasting about your help, not feeding gossip, not comparing your children or grandchildren, not putting your spiritual life on display, not explaining every no, and finally, not announcing joys that are still incubating. Each of these silences is not emptiness, but power, a power that becomes serenity and respect for yourself. If you stop to reflect, you'll notice this path doesn't aim to make you invisible, quite the opposite. It gives you back control over what you choose to reveal and what you choose to keep. Because it's not about living with dark secrets, but about protecting your inner treasures with discretion. Silence, when wisely chosen, is a faithful guardian of the soul. I want to thank you for staying with me until now. You are an essential part of this community of wisdom seekers we've created here in the Stoic Garden. My name is Gabriel, and my purpose is to walk alongside you on this journey toward an old age that's more conscious, more dignified, and lighter. I'd love for you to write in the comments where you're watching from. That way I'll know where this shared garden is blooming. And I want to leave you with a phrase to seal today's lesson. My silence is power. Write it, share it, and make it your own. Don't forget to send this video to a sister, a friend, or someone dear to you. We never know when a single word can become the relief another person needs. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for choosing this path of wisdom and courage. And now, on your screen, you'll see 2 more videos that I'm sure you'll find interesting. Pick one, keep learning, and continue cultivating a life of calm, purpose, and self-love.